Hello, everybody. I'm so excited for day 5, March 23rd, to have with us my mentor, the writer extraordinaire, Dr. Tom Romano from Miami University, now retired, but back to teaching. The author of, Tom, when I grabbed this stack off of my shelf, which is now quite depleted over here, collapsing, because my favorites are all over here where I can reach them. All of yours sit there. And one of the things I did was I tried to put them in order, because you're the author who, every time there was a new Tom Romano book, I was just like this. Oh, Tom's going to make sense to me. Because Clearing the Way, which was your first book, which for me, 1987, I started teaching in 1983. And when I read this, I was moving into middle school. And what I loved about it was that it presented a vision that I've embraced since, but that no one else was really sharing. And what I was curious about is I went 1987, and then this was the next book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because this is 1995, which seems like a long time. And this one still has notes in it, because not only one of the most beautiful covers,
I know,
Heinemann history, I think, but life stories, multiple genres. I mean, I can't even tell you how much I've used this book. Look at all the coffee stains on the corners. And then more multi-genre, right? Blended genre, alternating style. And for me, clarifying what the assignments were going to look like, how I was going to add all of the things that I was kind of playing with in my classroom, but not really embracing like you had, what multi-genre could be. And any book that I truly love has this in the front, Return to Penny Kittle, right? I love this book, not just my name, but you need to give me this back. Then this one where I took your course at UNH, because
right.
this book had come out and I was like, I've got to take it. It's all about voice, something I'm not great at teaching. I need to know more. And you asked us to read the book and write a one-pager, which I'd never heard of. And I wrote about feeling like a cowboy, like making territory for myself in my high school. Then Fearless Writing, which I still adore. And it had pictures of you with the granddaughters who are now older. Then Write What Matters. But I think Zigzag was before that, correct?
Yes. Zigzag was before Fearless Writing.
Okay, because Zigzag is the one book that I have scoured the house for and can't find. It's here somewhere. But the other thing I noticed as I went through these, Tom, is your personal notes to me are just so beautiful in the front covers of these books. You're really, really good at that. And I love having this collection. So we're thrilled to have you. Kelly, tell me about your relationship to Tom and his work.
Well, I wanted to say what a thrill it is to see you again, Tom. And I think Penny and our careers kind of follow the same timeline, just about. And so you were a godsend very early. You know, you were the first person I even heard the phrase multi-genre paper from. And I want to say, as I grew and eventually became co-director of the Long Beach State Writing Project, that your books were a staple every summer for our teachers who came through the Institute. So to be able to hang out with you and to call you a friend is kind of a surreal moment. So it's so good to see you.
Good.
And can I just say how much your last book I really, really love. Mine has still got a bunch of Post-it notes. I mean, I love all your books, but I just thought it was super, super practical. Write what matters.
Agreed.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun to write that book over a summer. It was great. Yeah. Hey, let me tell you one thing here, a little story. Penny, you mentioned it, Clearing the Way, 1987, and Writing with Passion, 1995. Big gap there. And I can remember my brother-in-law, one of my brothers-in-law, driving to Cincinnati, and Tom, he was kind of an acerbic fellow, and he said the same thing. He said, well, so that's been a long time. And my hands on the steering wheel like got white knuckled. And I said, well, there was a novel and a dissertation in there somewhere.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Although I have to say,
you might have gained momentum, Tom, too, because you said you wrote the last one over one summer.
that's true.
Penny and I just took 2 years to write a book, so
Yeah.
we're in awe.
Yeah.
You know,
and
I have to say also that, you know, after I wrote Clearing the Way, which I listened to with your talk with Ernesto,
yeah.
and he was talking about writing during the school year. And I could remember writing, you know, I had 2 summers to write, but then, you know, every weekend, every long weekend, I would write the book. And it was disheartening to hear his story. And after I finished Clearing the Way, I thought, I'm done. I will never write anything again. This is it for me. And because I felt what Don Murray said one time when I asked him in a class, I told him how I would often feel that way after writing an essay or a story. And he said it was natural to have a follow period after you wrote something big. And I thought that's right on the button, I think, for me anyway.
After about my 3rd or 4th book, I thought to myself, I'm done. I can't, what else am I going to write about reading? How many books can you write about reading and writing? And I had dinner with Tom Newkirk, and I said, Tom, because he was pitching me to do a book for Heinemann. And I said, Tom, I'm not sure that I have another book in me. And he turned to me and he said, you're still in the classroom, aren't you? And it was just such an illuminating moment. I mean, even Penny, like a lot of times I'll say, I'm doing this workshop next week. I don't really know what I want to say. And Penny would always say, share what you're doing in school.
Yeah.
Right. What are you doing this week? Because it's so illuminating of all the things you believe. But, you know, I had the same experience with Right Beside Them, because I really tried to spend it all in that book. And it was the story of what I believe, right? And then I presented it at the UNH Summer Institute, a keynote on that book. And Tom Newkirk wrote me a personal letter that came in the mail about a week later and said, you really have a lot more you want to say about reading. I'd love to see you do that.
That's great.
And
Yeah.
I had not at all imagined that I was going to write again. And that I think there's a sense of, somebody said it, Mary Oliver or somebody, spend it all. Like right now, spend it all. Don't save stuff. And I felt like I had. So then what else is there? But we've all found ways to find. And I also want to say, how many teachers tell me they want to write? All 3 of us wrote while we were also teaching.
Yeah. Right.
I was up early, sometimes got nothing out of getting up early because I just couldn't produce anything. But that's how we all did it, right?
Yeah.
You shoehorned it in.
I couldn't, you know, when I was listening to Ernesto and what he had that writing spot from like 4 to 6 p.m., something before he went to get his kid. And I thought, I reflected on writing Clearing the Way, and it was like the weekends and long weekends and vacations, but I could not write anytime during the day while the school year. You know, I'd have like 150 kids a day. We were writing, believed in, you know, teaching them to write and having them write and read a lot. But I could fool with the draft in the evening sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I had a printed copy, I could fool with it and revise in that. But yeah, man, it was, a friend of mine said, you know, in fact, in Zigzag, I have a chapter about writing Clearing the Way, which is kind of funny. It's, I'll send it to you and you'll see why.
I'm going to reread it.
He said, you were really dedicated that year, Tom. So yeah.
Well,
I was afraid I wasn't going to write the book. You know, after I got a contract, I was afraid that I wouldn't write it. Philippa, by the way, Philippa that had me send her a chapter. Every time I finished a chapter, she had me send it to her, and she would write back a little encouraging note. I think she was afraid that I might not write it either, so she was holding my hand.
Yeah, well, I think we all need editors who hold our hands.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how writing is different for you after all of these books, or is it all really just the same? What's the process like for you?
Well, I mean, you know, I've got that writer's notebook that I keep, you know, that I called a journal back in 1973. And, you know, before I wrote this last book, Write What Matters, I went back to the point where I had written Fearless Writing in 2013, and I read through all of my notebooks to see what I could pick up. And then I have, for that book, I also had folders with, like parallel structure, leads, drawings. I had all, I just kept putting stuff in there. So I would get that stuff out and, start to go through it and craft some leads and get into it. Trust the gush.
That's beautiful.
Hope for the gush.
Absolutely. Now, have you ever co-written with someone?
No. Yes, I did. This was an interesting story. In 1985, I was taking classes at UNH, and I was in a seminar about writing with Murray, and there were 17 of us in there. And Lori Nielsen, who was a graduate student with me in that program that Graves had, Lori and I were in this research team with Don and Jane and Ruth Shigori, and each week we read a narrative. So we're talking like 30 narratives over the course of the year. And one weekend, I told Lori that I was researching how filmmaking was like writing and not like writing. And I told her about, because I had made Super 8 films, and I told her how the editing process I just loved in making documentary films. And I said, but a filmmaker, they usually turn that over to an editor. The filmmaker, the director doesn't make it. And she said, well, why don't we give each other our data this week? And then each of us writes a story from the other person's data.
Wow.
So then we collaborate. We did that and read that at our group on Friday. And then for our paper in Murray's class, we wrote a paper about, collaborated about doing that. So that was interesting, was good. And we both found it. We were, unlike you and Kelly, we were really protective and reluctant to give it to each other's ideas.
Oh, that was there once in a while with Kelly. We definitely had our ups and downs as co-writers. I mean, it can be very hard. What do you want to know, Tom or Kelly?
So, Tom, you retired, but you're not retired.
Yeah, Miami has this retire rehire program for 3 years that you can do. And when I retired in 2019, I had this endowed chair at Miami, and the time was up, and that was 45 years of teaching. And I thought, well, this is probably a good time. So I retired, but then I thought, maybe I better do this retire rehire for one class. So I've taught one class 20, 21, 22 here. And this will be the last one, I guess.
What class is it?
It's a class that I developed about 7 years ago called Teaching Writing for Educators. And Miami had made this brilliant move, I think, about 10 years ago. The liberal ed committee got together and they made some changes in the core courses that students had to take. And one of the things they did was for decades and decades, students at Miami took 2 courses in freshman English. And the liberal ed said, okay, 1 course is required in freshman English, and then kids have to take an advanced writing course somewhere. So every department was encouraged then to propose a writing course for their discipline. And they were really clear about this can't just be a content course that you pseudo call writing. It has to be a writing course.
Wow.
So man, it was easy to, the chair asked me to develop a course, and it was easy after, 40 years of teaching and all these different courses I taught. So yeah, I've been teaching that since then, and I just love that course. About 24 undergraduates, couple freshmen, some sophomores. Every now and then I'll have a senior in there who's put off until they have to take it their last semester. So yeah, I enjoy that class a lot.
Well, could you tell us, like, what's a class period like?
So we would start off with, as I've done since 1988, with every class I've taught anywhere, I read a poem at the beginning of the period. And pointedly, we do not look for hidden meanings or anything like that. I seek to choose a poem that's accessible at one reading, and I practice it. I want to give it the best reading I can. And my purpose is just I want to get that good language poetry out there. And I want them also, so many of our students, it's like, if it doesn't rhyme, how can you call it a poem? And there's so many contemporary poets out there that I want to read. So that's how I start off the period every time. And then we will, I remember you mentioned priorities. Very soon up front, my class meets twice a week.
Mhm.
Very soon up front, we will explicitly talk about what we're going to do the next class. Unless I want to keep something as a surprise for them. But I want them to know about that so I can get that out of the way, so that, at the end of the period, I'm not saying, don't forget.
Yeah.
So, and then we go about the business of the day, whatever that is. Like this, before our break, they were developed creative nonfiction essays. And so, there were days when they scouted around for ideas. They were ideas that I got from two of my good friends about drawing frames of indelible moments and then writing into them. And of course, because of my two friends, I showed them how I did one also. And my drawings, by the way, Penny, are immensely encouraging to them, because it's like, if you can do that, I sure as hell can draw
Oh, that's
pictures
funny.
right into it. And then, one day writing leads, one time writing an ending. And then, and of course, the centerpiece, I think, after I get them to produce a lot, is conferring. And I do a conference in front of the class with one of them. And I ask them to watch and listen. And then and after it's done, then we talk about what I did and what I didn't do. And, talk about how the writer felt about the conference. And, I try to reduce it to, I think it was Graves I first got this from, simply saying back what I heard, and I don't look at the draft, because I can get distracted by all kinds of rhetorical things, right? Grammatical things. I just say back to them what I remembered, and that tells them that some of what they wrote is getting through to me. And then it also lets me think as I come up with stuff. It makes more and more of the detail unfolds. And I ask questions about places where I'm, where I was lost, or where I wonder about something more. And then, my idea is I want to get them talking more, saying more. Every now and then I can't resist and say, "Ooh, you ought to put that in there." But I try not to be too directive, and we'll ask them, I try to end the conference with, what will you do next? After we've talked, what will you do next? I've forgotten part of it. I also asked them in the very beginning, before they start to read to me, what if they would like me to listen for anything. And they might have something, but I encourage them. A lot of times when I share a draft with people, I don't know what I want them to listen for. I don't know where I'm having trouble yet. Sometimes I do, but not always. So if they just want to say, let me read this to you and let me know how it lands on you, that's enough for me. And then we send them off to revise. I also make them bring in a printed draft when we work in conference like that. And I know that they probably don't write that way anyway, but for one time, I want to have them work on a printed draft the way I do.
Yeah.
And I also bring in my magic pencils that they can use. They're called Ticonderoga, not
Those
tie.
are the best. I have them right here.
Like little cylinders. So
Yeah.
so that's what we're doing. And we'll start after. Well, when we get back after break, I'm asking them in 2 different sessions to read everybody's creative nonfiction essay. So there were 24 of them. There's about, I don't know, about 45,000 words it looks like. But we'll do those over 2 sessions, and then we'll dive into multi-genre. That'll be how we end the semester for about 7 weeks.
So how many pieces of writing do they do in that one semester?
Well, they do. I was just looking at the grade book. I keep a grade book like I did in high school to keep track of who's turning and what and all that.
Yeah.
They will have done 11 one-pagers, and then countless quick writes,
Uh-huh.
and then they'll have done creative nonfiction essay over, let's say, 2-3 drafts, I hope.
Mhm.
And then they'll do a multi-genre paper, which gets, invariably gets really long for them because, they start out thinking, how can I possibly write so much about one topic? But then the more they write, the more they come up with to write. So, yeah.
I love that vision of what is in a college course, not just the what, but the how, for teachers who
Yeah.
are wondering about how to prepare students. I mean, it seems obvious to me, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You don't encourage them to write in a formula, right?
No, and when you were asking about what I'm learning about writing, I mean, from teaching them, these kids come into my classes, sophomore, juniors, whatever, and they don't know how to write narrative.
Mhm.
Some are really good at expository writing, and some of them, you got to get them to expand more and more. But in this creative nonfiction essay, when I want them to slow down and use dramatic narrative to write about those indelible moments so that the reader comes close to experiencing it, not just understanding it, they have to work hard at that, and not all of them succeed at that. And with me, I'm pretty good at that. But what I'm not really good at in this essay that I'm writing with the kids, this ending is I'm just banging my head against the wall trying to get the words right over 8 drafts now of saying some expository, reflective things that hold some weight. What it all adds up to. I think many of my students are better at that than I am.
I love how each kid is reading every other kid's paper, that they're swimming in it. I mean, it's almost impossible to read 20 other papers and not pick up some thinking for your own paper.
Yeah. I'm thinking I'll let you know how these discussions go next week.
Absolutely. I also like, Tom, that one of the things we heard from the Respect the Mic group, which is a group of, it's a high school spoken word poetry group, but we interviewed the founder and one of the graduates. And the thing that I noticed the most in reading their work is that it wasn't about poetry. It was about finding themselves as writers, about learning a process, about finding words to explain what they were thinking. And I think too often we think about writing in a narrow shoot of its purpose instead of what the writer is doing. And you focus so much on narrative, which other people may say, well, why would they need all that narrative? But you're really just focusing on helping them learn this process of becoming writers.
Yeah. And I firmly believe that the narrative writing, I think a lot of our kids have to go through the narrative before they can come up to what it means. I remember how many times we'd hear teachers say to high school kids, don't tell me what it was about. I want the theme or whatever. Don't just recap the thing because I read it. But I think a lot of times kids had to go through that and retell it to themselves what the open window meant or some novel that they've read before they can. Well, it's that writing is learning. It's that language being generative of thought, and they have to go through that.
Yeah. Do you know, one of the things you spoke about that I remember so vividly from being a student in your class is the conferring, because it's a week-long seminar that we took. I think it might have been 2 weeks the year I was there, but we had to sign up with a slot with you that was about a half an hour that you blocked out to talk to us about our writing. And I was terrified, because I had revered your work for so long, and I had written this thing that became the introduction to The Greatest Catch. but it really wasn't any particular form. It was kind of a list. And I'm sitting in Ham Smith on the bench waiting for this person to get done. And you're there, and I can actually feel myself sweating because I've got to talk to Tom Romano about my draft. And the funny thing to me is, not only did you make me feel like I was after something important, and that this piece of this introduction, that whatever this was, could become the introduction to this collection, which you wrote the foreword for. But I left that meeting and I had a meeting with Don Murray at his house. Like, we'd agreed to meet at the end of class, and I took him the same piece of writing. So I had a conference with you followed by a conference with Don. And I remember thinking, pay attention to what he does that Tom didn't do, because I was still trying to learn, like, what do I do as a person who confers with people? And Murray was so funny. We sat on his porch, in the new place out on Marbury Lane, and he sat there reading, and he didn't move. His face doesn't move. He reads my draft and he says, I don't know what Romano said, but I wouldn't change a word. And I was like, oh my God. It was like all I needed in the world was for Don Murray to say this.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that both of you, for me, were so respectful. Don Graves was like this. He would say, I know what you're saying here. There was this sense of the humanity of the conference. It wasn't about moves or strategies. It was, you're sharing something important, and I hear you.
It's some authenticity in responding. Let me say one thing about the conferencing. Which some people bridle about this, but it's what I try to do. I try to avoid saying anything that is like a little dog yummy. Oh, good this, or oh, excellent. I try to just, and when we debrief, I try to point this out. It is my I hope respectful engagement with the mind of that writer. And if she looks up from her reading, she's going to see me looking right at her, bearing down to listen as hard as I can and engage her in a conversation in which I'm trying to learn about what she's doing as she is doing it. And oftentimes, almost always, students don't realize that I've never said, oh, that's good, or that's excellent, anything like that. But when I ask the reader how she felt, I say, did I like your writing? And sometimes they're shy and say, well, I think you did. But they know they've had my engagement and that I am respecting them. And it's like, for whatever my mind is worth, it's for 15 minutes here, it's yours. It's you and me.
No dog yummy treats.
That's a pretty smart observation, that's actually not what students want, right? They want our engagement with their thinking and their work. I love the attention to the body language and the reflection, right? So you're paying attention to the student, and then in the reflection time, you get to kind of pay attention to how did you do from the view of the student. Reflective teaching, that's so you.
I want to also say, I don't know if we have time to go here, but for a long time, Tom, I've always considered you sort of the godfather of the multi-genre paper. And even today, I'll be in an audience of teachers and I'll ask, how many of you know what a multi-genre paper is? And it's very, very few. And so I just wanted to say, if you're interested in exploring Tom's work on multi-genre, that it's a piece of, it's a unit I think that should be in every class. And I know online, Tom, you've posted student examples that were very helpful for my students in high school to take a look at what exemplary multi-genre papers look like. They were extraordinarily helpful for my ninth graders.
I
Every
am the godfather of multi-genre. I'll take that. And I got to thank Michael Ondaatje, the Sri Lankan Canadian writer whose book, The Collected Works of Billy the Kid, just opened my eyes to the possibility of multi-genre. So it's been career changing for me. And it also makes me think of something else, Penny, that when you were talking about writing a book, and Kelly too, after your first book or two, Newkirk once said that the next book grows out of the last book.
Mhm.
And, Writing with Passion had 2 chapters on multi-genre in it.
Mhm.
And then the next book is all about multi-genre, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have had some of the most important conversations with kids, and the most important pieces of writing come out of multi-genre again and again and again, because there's something about how else might you write about this? What form might this idea take? That is such an important move for kids to experience. The forms aren't dictated on my campus so much of the time, how a student might write something. And we are spending so much time kind of pigeonholing into forms in high school that I think the freedom is where my students will say it's like my creativity was unleashed because they had a little more agency.
Yeah.
It removes that artificial separation of discourse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever find that your type A students are the ones who are really extraordinarily good at writing academic essays, get a little panic at first and going into multi-genre?
Yes.
Yeah. I had one last semester who said, I don't like this. I need you to tell me exactly what you want, and I need you to show me exactly how I'm going to do it. Right. And I was like, but that's just too easy. Right. That's just too easy to tell you to jump through these hoops. But she was truly uncomfortable. So I do.
I was going to say the students invariably do things. There are certain things I want them to do in their multi-genre papers, but then invariably they do things that I never would have thought to ask for that are extraordinary. So, yeah.
My daughter wrote one on her brother on being the little sister, and she used what we called the glue, which is what goes between the pieces in your project that can bind it together. Hers were definitions, and she did a definition of a brother, and then she did a definition of a sister. And they were just so important, short little things with the number of definitions. It's this, and it's this. Oh, I was just like, wow. And the other interesting thing was noun for her brother, verb for her. She was the one who was in motion. So I just feel like multi-genre allows an expansiveness that we need, as does all of your work.
Yeah.
So I've learned so much from you, Tom, over the years. And even today, I've learned that I need to up my shirt game considerably. And so you've put that pressure on me as well. So I just want to say what a treat it has been to reconnect with you. I don't think we've seen each other since Washington, D.C.
I know, been a while. I was thinking about that. We went to the White House.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so fun. Yeah. Well, Tom, thank you for spending time with us, and for teachers who will be watching. It's a gift.
And thank you. I enjoyed seeing you two and chatting with you, and we'll see you in the future someday.
Absolutely.
Be well, everybody. We'll see you all tomorrow.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.